What's up, guys? We're going to hop into Serum today and see what we can make. I'm thinking of making some more sustained style bases, and I know you guys love that, so I figured I'd chuck the recording button on, and we'll see what we can do. Going to be working in G today, mainly. So we'll Command Shift down arrow that 3 times, we get to G0. So, first thing we might want to do when we're making a big horn is chuck them both on an analog BD sign. And we turn the sub on. So we just got a really big triple sub right now. So now we can start moving these oscillators up. Push this up to 3, push this up to 3. Maybe adjust the fines so we get like a phasey effect. Could even push the semitones up so we get a like... Now notice here, I've put this one on 3 plus 5, and this is a 3 plus 4, but I'm moving the fine up so that when that's at 100, that's essentially 3 plus 5 right there. So it's, 100 fine is 1 semitone, and 12 semitones is 1 octave. So we'll put this up to 4, and then we put the fine up right close to where it would just push that essentially over. See, like when I push it up to 100, then they're both 3 plus 5, same phase. So there's no issues happening. Can mess with the phase here, but really what we want to do is adjust. Cool, so that's a pretty cool effect. We can go and dive into some stuff in here, but I'm actually going to do some post-processing outside of Serum today. So we'll see what we can do with a saturator. So that's pretty cool, but it's very harsh as well. So one thing when you're working, like when you start distorting stuff, the relationship between the sub and the oscillator levels is really important. So as I increase the sub, it gets more distorted. As I take it away, it gets cleaner, but less grungy and grimy. Could even increase, we could put a resonant filter on, so we just sort of put the cutoff low, find a big resonant peak, turn on the key tracking, and then move the cutoff to where we want. Yeah, I don't really want to use any Serum effects for this one. So you'll notice that this sound is like super mono. So obviously the oscillators are both just like single oscillators. So it's like super in the center. So we want to add a little bit of width. One way I've been doing that recently is with the hybrid reverb, or if you have hybrid or if you have convolution reverb, it's the same thing. So hybrid is half convolution, half normal reverb. So I'm just going to put the blend fully over to the convolution side. And then it's pretty simple. We don't want it to have a long decay. So we want a short decay, but then the size and the stereo we want big. So it pushes it out wide. And we put this before the distortion. Actually, no, we'll put it after because we really want that one driving the tonality of the sound. So now we can try different things. Mess with the decay. That was pretty cool. So now we might get an auto filter on. So we can make little whomps right now. You know, if you just adjust the frequency like this, I mean, we have a fairly sustained sound at the moment, so we could do something like this. Can we even make that quicker? But obviously it's a bit weird depending on where the phase meets it. You could also not use an auto filter, you could just use a utility and do something like this. Then maybe after that we then want to add more distortion, so you could add I mean, I want to see what's native to Ableton, because I know you guys don't have a lot of the, like, all of the effects, like the over, what am I saying? You have the third-party effects that I have. Yeah, some erosion. Adds a little bit of like high-end sort of noise there. Add some overdrive. I might do this where I add some more distortion to the inner areas so that we can then create a dedicated sub. So I'm going to group all of this up. I'm going to call this the mids. And then so that was Control G to group it up, then Command D, Command or Control D to duplicate, call the other one sub. So now, as you would imagine, well, actually something I've been doing lately is instead of using like a filter, I have been using an OTT to get the crossovers. So I turn the inputs down, I turn the outputs down, and all the upwards and downwards compression, I get that the fuck out the way. Obviously the sound changes a lot each time. But you see, like, the OTT's not doing anything to it now. So now it's purely used as a multiband sort of EQ. Well, not that any EQ is a multiband, obviously. But, so now what we could do is for the mid-band, we just turn down the output of the sub. And then we duplicate that and put it on the sub-band. And we leave the sub, but we turn down the outputs of the mids and the highs. So now we have this perfectly split. But then on the sub band, we don't want any of these effects on it. Now, if we bring a span up, we just want to see what's actually going on here. Obviously, this one is one that I've made with mid-side. So when I look at this waveform, I want to tell you what I can see. There's quite a few issues that I'm seeing with the sound. The first one is that the sub isn't the strongest harmonic. The fundamental of that upper tone is the strongest. So that's bad there, because we want the sub to be a lot more powerful. The second thing that I'm seeing is that a lot of this red, which indicates that the side information is going over the mid information, means that we won't have good mono compatibility. And I can test that with the utility. So if I make that mono, you know, it's better than I actually expected. The characteristic of the sound definitely does change, though. So what ends up happening is, like, as we added on that convolution reverb, the convolution reverb added on a bunch of shit on the sides. So now there's, like, this offset between the mids and the sides. And what happens is now the distortion is really emphasizing everything, but those sides are really emphasized a lot. So when they are taken away, when I put it into mono, and we just hear the original mono signal, we actually, it sounds a little bit weak. So what can we do? We can jump back into the patch here. We'll go into the mids. Now, this hybrid reverb is on 50 dry, 50 wet. So what we're going to do is group that and put it at 100% wet. Then we're going to control G or command G. I already control G to group it. Control D to duplicate. And on the second one, we're going to delete it. So we got our dry chain with no reverb. And then we got our, well, I'll just leave that hybrid reverb, right? So now we've allowed more of our dry signal to stay through, but there's also more wet. So originally we just took that 100% dry and we gave 50% to the wet and left 50% of the dry. Now we've got 100% wet and 100% dry. So what we can do now is we can reduce the hybrid reverb amount by reducing its volume of the purely reverb chain. So now you notice that the sound does change characteristic, because with no hybrid reverb, it's like that. With only hybrid reverb, it's like that. So when we go back into our master channel now, and we hit the mono button, because we've reduced a bit of the side information, when we collapse it into mono, the characteristic of the sound still upholds better than it did before. I think that sounds pretty good now. So just to touch base on that, and we've made it a parallel chain, and we reduced by about 6 dB the reverb chain, so that the middle chain, the dry chain, is still the most prominent, powerful thing, so that when you collapse it into mono, it still sounds pretty good. So we'll make these all neat. So now we might need to move on to the next issue, which was the sub. So what we do is we literally can just boost up the sub there. But what I actually will do is I'm going to go into the OTT and just boost the output here. So we can watch what happens as I boost this output on the OTT on the sub channel. Now, usually when I push my subs in span, I like them to be around the -24 mark. So that's pretty good there. I still think that the resonance on this fundamental tonal sort of frequency here is pretty harsh still though. So there's a few ways that we can solve that. Usually I would use soothe because it's a bit more surgical, but for the sake of this, I'm going to add on a multiband compressor now. So multiband compression setting. I'm going to put that on the mid band here. And what this is going to do, now I'm going to put it before the OTT, because we want this OTT last so that it takes away any sub. What this is going to do now is it's going to sort of clamp down a bit on that. See, on this, when we do it like this, there's not a lot of high information, there's a lot of mids. Now when we turn on the multiband compression, we can see here that the midband is really being clamped down. So we want to like look at this a bit more surgically in terms of like what's happening in span. And we want to figure out like what frequency crossover we want. So if you have a look, we have a lot of harshness ranging from about 400 through to, I'd say about 3K. And then it drops off. So after 3K, or maybe it's more like after 4K, we want more information. So what we could do is on the crossovers here, we'll set the high band to 4K there. So what that means is that this band will be everything above 4K, and then the mid band will be everything below 4K, but above 100. But we're not worrying about the low band because that one is our sub. Unless, another thing we could do is make the low band at 400 here. So we push the low band up to 400. And now essentially what happens is anything under 400, which is this region, will be affected by this band. Anything between 400 and 4K, which is this region here, will be affected by the middle band. And then everything above 4K is affected by the high band. So we can even see visually what happens here is translated to what's happening here. I'm actually going to turn the sub off for this one, just so we're not being, so that it's not showing. I can't speak to you today, guys. I'm sorry. I just want to turn the sub band off so it's not there. So we can see that the signal here is really being clamped down because it's really hot, but the top one isn't. So what we might do is we might compress this down. So we want to push it all the way down. Right, so now our highs are being really compressed. They're being pushed down in volume even more. But now we're going to compensate for it by really boosting the output. Can you guys see what's happening? So when I turn this off, that 4K plus region, it's really low. But when I turn it on now, because we've pushed down on it even more, but then boosted the output by a lot, it's now being brought up. And the same thing. The mid-band is spiking even above span here. But now we turn this on, and I might even clamp this down more. Now it's a bit more controlled. So obviously one of the problems with this is that everything that is being affected is being triggered by this single band here. So what I might do is I might add another multi-band compression before that, right? So I'm going to turn that one off. And this one, I'm just going to focus on clamping down on this region here. So I'm going to do it from 300 to about 800. So my top band is going to be 800. My lower band is going to be about 300. Which means that the middle band here is now between 300 and 800. So I'm not going to worry about these two. I'm going to turn down the inputs for my upper and lower bands. We're just focusing on this mid band, which is just targeting this region now. So now what we're going to do is we're really going to clamp down on it. So you can clamp down by pulling down on this. You can also push down, go to this A tab here and push down. Now, I can't remember if this is the ratio that I think this is the ratio that we're doing it by. So obviously, like, if I bring it down here, it hits it at a certain threshold, but then this number determines how much it clamps down. So we're really clamping down on that frequency now. We got that under control. Now we can turn on the multiband compression above that. And now we find this one is bringing up our high band. So what we might want to do there is, instead of still affecting the mid band, we might turn off the input and completely remove any compression that's happening on anything but just the high band. So now this one's just affecting that middle region. And this one's just affecting the 4K and above region, as we can see here. We'll even clamp it down more. Now if we add our sub back in on this other band, now we can see that the sub is coming in a lot cleaner and better. And we have a nice healthy relationship here. Now personally, I think this dip in the 6 to like 13K region, that could also come up a bit, because I think the erosion, the noise from the erosion is quite hot there. But this region, you can see there's definitely a dip. So what we might do is we might just use an EQ8. Go back to our mid band. After our OTT. And we're going to hone right in. So we're going to push the upwards arrows so that we can be surgical and bring this up. So it's this region right here that we want to increase. So we're going to make it we're going to put the gain up, and we want the Q to be down. Maybe make the Q a bit wider. Without it. See, it just adds a bit more clarity in that high end there. We might even turn on another band and just reduce that noise a bit. Now another region that I noticed, I'm gonna leave this EQ because that's just affecting our highs there. Another thing I noticed is that we have a huge gap right here. So all of this region between 100 and 400 is not being used. Now, we can really work on that with the sub now, because obviously the main tonal sound, this top one, we don't care about that, because that's you know, this 500 and above region. So I'm also noticing that there's still some sub coming in here, so I'm gonna put another EQ8 on the end of that one and just make sure that I'm really, yeah, there we go. Cool. So now what we want to do is we want to go into our sub layer, and we want to start to add some overtones. But the problem is, if we add overtones, right, they're not going to be affected because we are only letting anything 88 and below through. So we need to actually remove what we've done on this sub patch. All of this stuff, so that it's just the sub. Now we can actually turn this OTT completely off. But obviously the volume's dropped down now, so we need to compensate for that by increasing this. And now what we're going to do is we're going to apply some distortion to the sub. So what we can do, there's a few ways we can do that. But the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to be quite surgical, and I'm going to going to menu, initialize, where was it? Oh, I'm forgetting now how to initialize the oscillators. Some noob shit right there. Anyway, I'm going to bring this all the way back down. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into the wavetable editing here, and I'm going to turn down this sub oscillator because the sub's already taking care of that. I'm going to turn this one up. And then this one. You can see that one coming in there. I don't think anything else needs to come through. Might boost the level up a bit. So it just brings all these up. So now if you look at the sound that we have now, the sub's a lot more powerful, the mono is a lot more powerful, and we don't really have these big frequency areas that are being neglected. Now, what you can do after this is you can just add on another EQ and do some final EQing. I also just need to make sure, yeah, I've got to turn down the random on that one. And turn down the random on the, so that it does the same thing each time. So this last EQ that's just going to affect everything now, I just want to look at what's going on. So I think this region here still needs a boost. Remember, the 2 to 4K region's harsh, so watch out with that. Another thing you can think of is by pushing the sub, it actually makes it quite nice. But obviously the balance is way off. Like the sub's too hot there. So what we need to do is add a saturator after this so that it cuts it off at 0. We'll hit the soft clip option on. So we've pushed up the sub to distort the sound so that it's a creative move. And then we're going to put an EQ after that to then bring it back down. And we can adjust, bring that down a bit more so that it's less distortion. Now, another thing I noticed is that obviously the sub, it sort of holds consistent, but the top sound jumps away. Because if we look at this utility here, we've added this. So what I might do is see if I put the utility up. But you see now we've curated the sound to have this happening. So I'm going to leave that in there. I'm going to duplicate that and put it on the sub channel. But I think I want it to do something more like that. So now we've got this cool little sound. I mean, if we just added like So now obviously we would have to manipulate the utilities if we wanted to continue doing this sort of stuff. Like we would have to start it here. And then on the sub, we would have to bring it across. Then we'd have to duplicate this whole thing and start working. So that brings the automation along with it. Let's do that. And then you get these cool little horns and stuff. So yeah, I hope you guys, like, that really gave you a lot of more, like, insight into how you take a basic sound and get it sounding, like, well mixed and, like, upfront and full. Because, I mean, if we take off all of the processing that we have on that, I mean, you can't even hear what's going on. It's literally just a sub going on there. I don't know why the middle one isn't showing up. But yeah, I hope you guys got some stuff out of that. Definitely, like, the main things I want you to take away from it is, like, check span. See what's happening on span visually so that you can figure out, like, what is the balance looking like? Which parts are too hot? Which parts are too low? How can you use, like, compression on specific areas by tuning in the multiband compressor? Or OTT, same thing, just finding specific areas. How can you compress those up or down? Down like we did with this one, up like we did over here. How can you use volume? How can you use EQ? Like, really get the sound, because we want... Like, even this, I don't like this right now. I think the sub needs to come up a bit more, so I'm going to turn the sub. Think about all those things. Then you can take a simple sound and make it nice. Cheers, guys. See you in the next one.